After having done all the hard work of looking through different types of bitwise operators, setting up the basic LED pattern, understanding, let's say, the nuances of the bitwise operators, we are now finally ready to do some fun stuff, which is building these dynamic patterns. Welcome back, friends. We are working on the bit by bit project for the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. In the previous video, we saw how we enhanced our code to accommodate dynamic patterns. Now it's time to get cracking and start building these. We'll start with this pattern, which will primarily focus on, let's say, left shift. So notice what's happening here is two LEDs are lighting up at one time, and thereafter it looks like the pattern keeps going left, and then it comes back to being, let's say, these two LEDs. So it kind of keeps repeating. This is what we will build in this video. Uh, now, Now, before writing any code, let's just visualize this once again. We will start with a simple pattern, which is, let's say, 2 bits setup, or which means two LEDs light up. And at every step, we will shift this by 2, because notice this is a left shift by 2. Of course, once we reach here, we must find a way to, let's say, go back to this pattern. So basically, we are just kind of toggling between these 4 patterns. Of course, we can build many other patterns, and we will see this with examples once the basic code is set up. I get back here to my code that I've been developing. Remember, we have this outer loop where we want to update the patterns, but right now my style is 0, which is static, and I'm printing 10101101, as we can see very clearly over here. Now, in order to, let's say, build the pattern that we want to build, the dynamic pattern, I'm going to create one more style over here. And I'm just going to say, look, if style is equal to, let's say, 1, then let's start with a slightly different pattern, which is basically all zeros, say 0000, and 000, let's say 00, say 11. So remember, I want to keep the last two LEDs on, and that's why I've done this. Again, thinking in binary really helps here. Of course, I must update this pattern as the code runs, as the loop runs. So I just go and say, look, if style is equal to, let's say, 1, I will have my pattern shifted to the left by 2 bits. So this will do exactly what I wanted to do. Now we will first run this. In fact, there are two problems with this code right now, but let's first run the code to understand them. Just for now, I'm making this quite slow so that we can observe things more carefully. I'm just making time sleep 2 so that it gives me a lot of opportunity to observe the code. Now when I run this piece of code, you notice my pattern does seem to form, but pretty interestingly, there are two problems. Like I said, we noticed that when the pattern started, in fact, these two were not lit up. It was B2, B3 that were lit up. And number two, the pattern worked for a while, and then after that, everything seems to be just off. Let's see them one by one, starting with the fact that the dynamic pattern seems to work only for a while. Now, in fact, that's quite easy to understand. If I look at the pattern itself, notice it has become a humongous huge number. Why did this happen? Well, because notice every time I am running through the loop, I am basically multiplying my pattern by 4. Because I'm left shifting by 2, that's multiplying by 4. And hence, this will just keep on becoming larger and larger. In such a large number, the way we have set up the bits, the lower bits will always be 0, and that's why the LEDs look to be all off. But remember, since we are dealing with only 8-bit numbers, I can put a condition that, look, if my pattern becomes more than 255, the largest I could do with 8-bit numbers, let me set the pattern back to, say, 0B00000011. When I run this piece of code now, you notice that the pattern would actually work fine. But if you're keen-eyed, you realize that still the first 2 bits were not, taken up in the very first iteration. So it looked like it started from B2, B3. Once again, the code is doing exactly what we're telling it to do, because fundamentally it's totally obedient. Think through our code. Basically, we are coming in here and we're asking ourselves, okay, look, if style is 1, then I will shift pattern by 2. Basically, left shift pattern by 2 bits. Now, in the very first iteration, the pattern comes in as 00000011. In the very first iteration, the pattern comes as 6 zeros, 2 ones. In fact, I end up shifting it, which is why these 2 bits are lit up. In fact, this is quite easy to fix. I will do the update of the style, let's say, at the end of this code. So basically, I'll have the whole thing updated. Let's say it must still be in the outer for loop, but I just do it here, and I just, let's say, put a comment here, say, in fact, this solves the problem for us. We'll see this working. Notice now the code starts on these 2 bits, goes to these two, goes to these two, and then back to, let's say, this bit. So, the pattern is now ready, which means that now we can, go back to the time that we wanted. So I'm just going to make it, let's say, 0.5 second because that looks more dynamic. So now I'm going to experiment with a few other patterns. Let's say I start with 0B, all zeros, just the last bit being 1. Now I would shift this not by 2, but in fact by 1. And once the pattern reaches the max, I'll just go back to shift it to, say, all zeros and the last one. Now this piece of code, when we run it, it's quite nice because we see that bits are going from 0 to 7 and then coming back once again. In fact, we can try now some other patterns as well. Let's say I started with, say, instead of all ones, let's say I added a 1 over here, and I hence also made this a 1 so that it repeats this, right? Notice when I run this piece of code, it's pretty cool as well. Both these bits are going from left to right. There's a small little gap, but they are moving together because the fundamental basis here is the left shift. In fact, you can try play with many patterns, and this is now pretty cool. Once again, think for a moment how left shift and in general bitwise operators are helping us in this project, because we really are not keeping track of the decimal values anymore. We are looking at individual bits and thinking about how they are moving. Building activities the way we are doing helps us understand concepts much better. And that is what we do at Ybyte. Look at our website www.ybyte.in, because we learn Python programming through such fun activities. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.